Looks like I made a mistake when I set this one up. I've actually got to admit you one by one rather than having it automatically log in. So bear with me while I admit people as they turn up. Okay, can everybody hear me? Yep, thank you.
Yep, all good here.
All good. There's Robert come in yet?
Yep, right here.
Okay, so we obviously can't see your happy face, Robert, but maybe you'd just like to give us an update on your background a little bit and where you see us fitting into the industry.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Is everyone here yet? Oh, 27, that looks about right. So I think we're good to go. All right, so what I'm seeing as a journalist, I guess probably most of you know my background. I do a lot of work around towing, writing articles, books, YouTube videos, etc. So I get to see quite a lot of towing problems, not just including weights. And I try and catch people before they've gone and spent money and then have to dip into their superannuation to buy a different vehicle, as happened last week. Specifically, what I mean by problems is a couple of things. One is incorrect weighing technique. And we're not going to go into the details now, but that's things like not having the vehicle completely level, weighing it on a soft surface, etc. That fundamentally the wrong technique from a physics and engineering perspective. The second problem I say is wrong advice, such as an insistence that the tow ball mass must be 10%, and the tow operator was frantically shifting stuff right over the top of the drawbar because it was only 9% and it's got to get it to 10%. Telling people that the yellow towing hooks are just flat out illegal. I don't want to get into the whole yellow towing hooks discussion now. It's enough fun on Facebook, that sort of stuff. So the advice there is fundamentally wrong and misleading. Now, aside from that, I think there's also room for improvement. So I've seen quite a number of reports, and I'm yet to see one. Well, actually, no, most of them, I would say, need a bit of room for professionalism improvement. So, for example, consistent spelling, consistent and correct use of terms. You look at the report and you go, hang on, you've called it TBM over here, you've called it tow ball mass over there. It's the same thing, but write it in one way, and just make it look a bit more professional and easier to use for people. Then I think there's also a discussion to be had around the scope of your advice. So at a very basic level, you could just say, look, here's the weights and that's it. Then at the net, but I think all of you guys go beyond that and should go beyond that. And that's where it starts to get difficult, because if somebody is overweight, or potentially if they're within weights, but they have a trailer sway problem, how far can you and should you want to go with advising that, even into towing setup? And I think that the example of trailer sway is a good one. And John's looked on those investigations, as I'm sure most of you know. You can have a trailer setup which is within limits, but unstable and prone to sway. Now, what sort of advice would you give somebody to fix that other than just slow down? This is when we start to get into concepts well beyond pure weighing. And I think it would be a good question, Rick, to sort of say, what is the scope of a weighing service? And at what point do you hand over to towing trainers or engineers or something like that? And I think that's maybe for everyone to decide, but I think it's also for your association to decide. Now, I will reiterate what Rick said at the start. I do have a list of towing weighing professionals on my website. That is a pretty popular page on my website. At the moment, I'm just throwing anyone that I hear about up there, which works. But I've also added a disclaimer to it saying that I haven't vetted all of these people, and you're using that list at your own risk, because I've seen quite a number of people, operators, who I would not want to recommend. But then again, if I've only heard about it secondhand, I don't know the full details. I'm not going to take them off the list because of that, but I can't wait for the MWAA to get up, so then I can recommend to people with confidence that the person I'm going to send them to do a good job. And what would give me that confidence? Well, a number of things which I discussed with Rick and I've actually listed on my website. Scales which are calibrated every 6 months as opposed to just forever. That I know that whoever is doing it understands the difference between GTM and GVM. Things like you can only tow trailers up to 750 kilograms unbraked, etc. I know that they're going to know how to operate the weighing stuff, and I know that the report has been mathematically checked, so I'm not going to look at it and go, yeah, that's just beyond the laws of physics. And that gives me the confidence to recommend people, and that's really what I'm looking forward to. Hopefully that gives you an overview of where I'm coming from, and hopefully that was useful to people.
Robert, if I may, one of the things that the association may need to look at taking out is I would assume that everybody within the association, if they are currently weighing, they hold public liability. Is that correct? Everybody's holding public liability at the moment?
Yeah, that's part of the bylaws.
Yeah, minimum insurance is for public
Who's
liability.
holding professional indemnity?
I don't have that one, no.
If you're not, then you are going to probably be very limited to as to the advice that you can give. Because
I hold professional indemnity insurance as well.
Yeah, so that's fine. If you've got that, then you can give advice, because then you're insured against any bad advice that you may give. All right. But if you're not holding professional indemnity, then you probably need to consider that as well.
We'll work it out when we get it later or tomorrow.
But it may be something the association may be able to hold.
Yeah, I just want to make sure
on behalf of the members. So that's something that may need to be investigated, Rick.
I totally agree with you, John.
All right, because if we don't, then if the second you offer advice and you don't hold professional indemnity, then you are opening yourself up for action.
Yeah, and before you have that conversation, you've got to figure out the likely scope of your advice. You know, how far you're going to go with advising people. You're going to advise them on what vehicle to buy, how to set it up, how to get rid of sway, or just how to get their weights within limits. You know, you could keep advising forever, really. And it's worth thinking about how far you're willing to go with that sort of advice, and make sure you've got enough background. Because there's one thing I will say again and again about the towing industry: there is so much old mateism which gets passed down from here and here to there, and it becomes folklore and fact, and you've really got to guard against that and get straight to an engineering source, read the regulations itself. Don't rely on anyone else. In fact, don't even rely on what I say, because everything I do, you can go read the regulations, etc. for yourself. I provide sources, and that should be the case for everyone else you get training and advice from.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've just finished doing a series of seminars up on the mid-north coast and north coast of New South Wales. And when I ask people what colour shackles they must have, unanimously across the room, they come back going, well, they've got to be yellow. And that's not the case. Well, that's just not the case. So there are a lot of furphies that emanated throughout the industry a number of years ago. And they've perpetuated, as Robert has said, they've perpetuated and they've become real problems. And we need to be able to sort the wheat from the chaff. Rick,
we can't hear you. Turn them off again. Hopefully this will be a platform that can be discussed as well, and you know, everybody will be on the same page there. Still nothing, yeah. Rick.
I've had a lot of interactions with the industry over the years, and we've got a lot of information that we can share.
No,
yeah. You're right now?
You go.
Okay.
Yeah, welcome back, Rick.
Okay. Robert, funny enough, you should mention the 10% towing. I actually watched a YouTube video produced by MDC stating categorically it must be 10% on that YouTube.
I know the guys at MDC, I'll have to watch that and then tell them. Well, actually, I'm not going to tell them anything. That's not my style. I'm going to ask them where they got that idea from, what testing they've done and everything else. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. I'm just going to say, where did you come up with that? Because I've researched this quite a bit. I'm going to produce a video on it, and saying it has to be 10% is like saying your tires have to be at 25 psi. Right? There's just far too many variables on that.
Okay. The other one I wanted to ask you, you've said in your system that calibration should be done every 6 months. We as an organisation at the moment have included in our bylaws that they should be calibrated on a minimum of every 18 months or whatever the owner's manufacturer's recommendations are. In our experience, and it obviously depends a bit on the scales, and I played with some Chinese scales a while ago and threw them out very quickly because they needed calibrating every 5 minutes. But the scales from MDC, from Newcastle Weighing Services, we calibrate every 12 months, and they're really just less than a kilo out. I think most other people with MDC scales would agree that that's about where their errors are.
NWA. NWS.
Yeah, Newcastle Weighing Services. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not MBI. Sorry, Newcastle.
Yeah.
Get the acronym right, Rick.
Yeah.
Newcastle Weighing Services. I should give them the full name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so where do you stand on that, Robert?
Doesn't have to be 6 months. I shouldn't have been that specific, sorry, but it should be within manufacturers' recommendations for the use. So, for example, I don't have a set of scales, but I do have a set of load cells which I use for measuring forward drive recovery forces, and they pop up and tell me to go get the thing calibrated when it needs it, for example. So I don't even have to worry about it. They just tell me, and whatever the manufacturer's is, and my website will reflect that shortly.
Yeah, so we've used 18 months or the manufacturer's recommendation, whichever is the shortest.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions from the floor at this point?
I think there's a big difference between providing information that's on trade rated scales versus non-trade rated scales. I think 12 month recalibration, if that's the manufacturer specification that's suitable. If you're weighing vehicles to put a plate on the vehicle to have specific weights, you would need trade rated scales, which would be more frequent recalibration, I would think.
Yeah, my understanding in West Australia, the rules revolve around if you're selling a product by weight, then the calibration rules are much more strict. And in our case, we're not selling by weight. So technically, I don't think that our laws in WA actually insist on being calibrated at all. But certainly, if you're providing a weight for an organisation that's using that then for licensing purposes, then yeah, the rules again are going to change. Michael, you've got your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if those in this community. Now, I find it's sometimes trying to find information for a specific vehicle, it can be difficult. And then you refer to a handbook and it's not, and it refers you back to the vehicle's B pillar, driver side pillar, and that information's not there. Now, I've sent countless emails to Kia Australia for their Serato in different years, and they can't provide me jack shit, let's just say. Now, I'm just wondering if guys would be happy to potentially have maybe a spreadsheet made up with all the manufacturers and specific OEM manufacturing specifications so that we can refer to quite easily and quickly. There's a lot of different dual cabs out there now, and the Nissan Patrol, the GU, has 3 different GVM ratings to different engine specs, although the axles are the same. And also then when it comes to GVM downgrade or tow ball weight downgrade for specific vehicles like the Mitsubishi Pajero, the NX, or the earlier series of the Y62. We know they fixed their issue with the Series 5. A lot of that information, a lot of weighing companies don't know about, or may know about, sort of don't take it into account. And for the consumer, they probably don't want to know that their car's going to lose GVM when they have a towing over 2.5 ton. But if we could have something that was something easy to reference, or maybe even a potential And I know this is more of a personal sort of side of things, but a messenger Facebook chat where a lot of these guys in this committee are in, where one of us are out on site weighing, and it's like, I don't know the weights of this vehicle. We can pop it into the chat, and one of us guys can potentially get back to that person quickly and say, yes, your Ssangyong Rexton has a front axle mass of 1,400 kilos and an 1850 rear axle with a 3,500 towing capacity and a 350 town bolo. Like, there's so many different capacities for vehicles that sometimes I haven't been able to get, and I've looked for weeks. And I've actually called upon other companies to see if they know, and they've got the same problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a database is a great.
Database is a great idea. I know.
Members.
A little bit careful about how we manage that. I know, like from Vanway's point of view, we actually run a database amongst ourselves that currently has 2,000 jobs on it. So almost any vehicle you come across, we've had we can reference at least that vehicle in the same year or close by. But every now and then when one trips us up, like I did a Mercedes the other day that had a wonderful specification of can tow 3 tons until it gets to 2.8 when the ball mass drops to 140 kilos. Da-da. There's no one in the world that can comply. There's no one in the world.
Yeah, I just want to make a point about those weights. It's just a really good question, Michael, and it is unfortunately incredibly complex. Now, as a journalist, you'd think that I'd be able to email or contact any car manufacturer and get that information straight away, right? Well, you would be mistaken. I have had numerous occasions where I have tried to get something like rear axle load or whatever spec you could think out of it, and they just don't even understand the question. And I'm not even, and I know the data's there somewhere. It's got to be there in some engineer's report somewhere, but you just can't get it out of them, even as a journalist. So that's the first issue. Don't assume you can just email the manufacturer or the dealer for this stuff, because they often won't have it. The second problem is the incredible variability in these things. So Ford Ranger, for example, used to have a nice clear GVM. I'm sure, you know, a mobile weighing operator should actually do a bingo game one day, just sort of state the GVMs of different vehicles off the top of your head. I'm sure we'll be able to know that PX range is 3,200, right? Well, have you looked at the next gen Ranger? There's about 15 different GVMs for it. Same deal for the Land Rover Defender, you know, and it gets incredibly variable. And someone mentioned a reduction in tow ball mass of one of the vehicles, Pajero, is another example of that. So the database is a good idea, but the sheer difficulty of getting all of that varied information is very, very difficult. And this kind of comes back to my original point, which is how far you're going to go with advice. Because if you say, yeah, you in limits, this, that, and the other, that might require you to do a lot of research to figure out what the limits of those vehicles are. And then that's obviously the stock vehicle you'll find something for, let alone a GVM upgrade of 10%, 50%, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's a great idea, but don't underestimate the complexity of gathering that data.
There is a database in existence at the moment. It's called the National Towing Mass Guide, and it's put out by the Queensland caravan industry on a annual to biannual basis, so one to 2 years, and it encompasses as much information as can possibly be done on every vehicle. And I mean every vehicle. It's been in production for at least 15 years that I know of. But the only way you will access that is if you are a member of your state organisation, right? Because it is for members only. That's
Rick, you have no volume again. Sorry, Rick, you're still out.
Yeah, we're now connected again. Have I got? Yes, I've got volume. Yeah, John, look, I appreciate that comment because I use the same thing. As a member of the West Australian Caravan Industry Association, it's given us access to that database, and it is invaluable.
It's a great starting point. It doesn't encompass everything.
No.
But it gives you a great starting point. And I think the industry setting up our own database would be fantastic. But I think if we were to make that information available, Rick, then our industry, our governing industry people would be upset.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think when the risk in providing that information is making sure it's 100% accurate. And I think Robert made a good point that the variations occur. And even whilst we use our database as a guide amongst ourselves, we always go on site and double check the numbers when we arrive at a job, because inevitably you'll find a changeover has occurred through month 3 to month 4 where the numbers have changed. And they're not represented on the database. So yeah, it's very important to double check it. But even the ones we get from Queensland, we always try and double check.
Yeah.
No, I've got a question. Just got a question. For the guys that are in the industry, the engineers and the like. Have you guys heard? Of when these like the heavies are out there and they're finding people and they're pulling you up and stuff. How are they getting this information? Like, if we can't seem to find it when we're weighing, like, how are they getting the weights information?
So, so with that, who are you referring to as getting the punitive action against them? Because there's not a lot happening in Queensland at the moment.
No, I mean, like, we've all heard the stories and all that sort of thing of, they're sitting outside like Longreach and all that sort of those places like that.
Well, even for an example, when the solar eclipse was on last year here in WA, we do know one person that got fined. But I think the question is, quite often if we can't find the limits, if people are going to get weighed on the side of the road, are the authorities that are doing that just taking the limits they can find on the car themselves, or do they have a database as well? Does anyone know?
In the case of Queensland, it's the TMR that are doing the weight checks. So they're road company, and you'll find that they've got access to all their registration data. So that's what's happening. But the punitive action that's being taken is very little. They actually still have a very strong education focus happening. It's only if the interaction becomes poorly attitude driven, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Or if they are grossly overweight, in which case it would be blatantly obvious anyway, then they may be taken off the road. But at the moment, it's still very much a strong education focus. Certainly here in New South Wales, with our work with transport, there is no visible. There's nothing on the horizon for us to be doing any sort of enforcement at all, or for transport to be doing any sort of enforcement. It's just not on the horizon. They're still very much education focused.
Because we get a lot of, like, we're over in WA in the northwest at the moment, and have been since July, and we get so many people coming to us, and they're like, "Oh, thought I'd come and see us because we're about to head east. We're about to go into Queensland, and the heavies are like hammering everyone over there."
Yeah,
it's all here.
It's not as bad as it's made out to be, but it's like the furfies that came out with yellow shackles and the towing hooks, Robert.
It's going to vary, obviously, but when we know in Western Australia that about 8 months ago there was a roadblock by the heavies at Manila Roadhouse, where 23 vans were pulled over and 12 of them needed semi-trailers or tilt trays from Port Hedland to pick them up as a result of that exercise.
And I should imagine that our statistics are probably reflected by every one of you guys as well, and we're currently sitting at about 48% overweight.
Yeah, 65 in our case.
Yeah, we're finding that our biggest offender to date is 849 kilos overweight, and our biggest tow ball download was 542 kilos. Right? And being an education focus, they're allowed to drive away. They're given strong advice, because joyfully, when I give my advice, I have transport standing alongside me, and I also have probably 2 highway patrol officers standing alongside me as well. And that gives a lot of credibility as to what the sort of corrective action they should take.
953 over GCM.
What?
Wow.
Yeah, and so you can see with these sort of figures, and unfortunately, I've had I've been involved in half a dozen crash investigations now as well, where our local crash investigation police will call me in for a towing incident where there's been an injury or a fatality. And it's, I can tell you right now, it's something that you don't enjoy. It doesn't always include caravans though. A lot of the stuff we've been doing is actually car trailers.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
That car travel's being overweight, the car being overweight.
yeah,
Or-
the car trailer being overweight and the car that was on the trailer being incorrectly loaded and speed leading to sway and roll over and ejecting the passenger out of the sunroof.
Wow.
Okay, look, guys, given that we're going to be running out of time very shortly, I think we perhaps should wind up for now. And I certainly express that by the time we rerun a Zoom meeting like this again, we'll have a paid version. We'll have some money, the Treasurer says. The money will start coming in shortly.
Yeah.
So by then we'll have the full-blown version, which means we won't be stuck on a time limit, because it's really, really great to carry on these conversations and learn from these experienced guys and other guys in the room and other operators as to the problems that they're hitting, the information they're struggling to find. It's really, really good value. So that's all part of this community process that this organisation should well become a very strong part of what we're trying to achieve. And I do believe that all of us are on the same foot, that we want to improve the industry. We want to make sure the minimum standards are being met. That not so much, obviously we can't eliminate so-called cowboys from the industry, but we can make it more beneficial for people to use a recognised caravan weighing business. And hopefully that's where we'll finish up. So, look, thanks very much for attending. Yeah, it's been great. I mean, we were blown away when when these guys up here and I first started looking at what we planned to do. We figured we might get 12 members in the first 12 months. And I received 60 inquiries for the link to this meeting.
Overwhelming.
And that's of about 85 or 84 caravan weighing companies I'm aware of around Australia. So it's a very high percentage, and certainly over 34, 35 turned up at the first meeting. I think there were 33 in this one at the start. So it's a really, really, really positive step that what we're trying to achieve is heading in the right direction. So
and I just want to add just quickly, and we really thank the guys that jumping on the board that don't really have much, aren't a real mobile weighing. They just love the industry. They're engineers. They're
John and Robert.
John and Rob, I mean,
Ken.
you guys and Ken, Ken's been a godsend.
Your information is going to be invaluable to this group, so thank you guys. I might be opening a can of worms here as well, so sorry, Rick, if I'm about to open up a can of worms. But if there are any mobile weighing businesses out there that have any issues that you think need to be addressed, or something that as an association you would like us to look into, email them through. Rick, I'm happy to take the inquiries, but it's always nice to see what other people in the field are seeing. We've been so isolated up in Northwest WA for a while. We've been on our own little island nearly. So, if you have any concerns about anything that you've seen in the industry, please shoot them through, because it's the only way that we'll grow in as an association.
Yeah.
And we might have an idea for what we can focus on for training and education and, helping us out as a community, as a group.
And one more thing, so I've been in the mining industry for many years now, and what the approach that we have in mining is there's no stupid questions, and we don't want people to feel that they can't ask a question because they're going to be ridiculed or they're going to be judged or anything. I really want this to be a safe space. I feel that, the only way we're going to grow, and it's the same in the mines or whatever, the only way you're going to learn from things is if you ask the question. And if you ask the question, you don't get ridiculed and you don't feel like, people are judging you and all this sort of thing. We really just want it to be a safe space for a really, really successful community to come together and share not their secrets, but their industry experience.
Here. Yep, I'm with that. Okay, guys, meeting's about ready to close. So
Beautiful.
I'll send an email around shortly, the next day or two, with information about joining. It is on the website. If you go to the website, you'll see a join now button, which you can do right now if you want. But I'll certainly send out a message to all those that have attended and those that's expressed an interest in attending, because a number of those haven't been able to get here. Yeah, let's move on from
Thanks.
there and grow in strength. So thank you very much for coming. Cheers.
Thanks,
Well done,
everybody.
Rick. Thanks, Rick.
Go, Rick.
Appreciate your
Thank
work.
you.
Thanks, guys. Lovely
Thanks.
to see you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good. No question's a silly question. Because sometimes I want to ask Rick or Jeff or some of the questions.
I heard that, Rebecca.
We all did.
We all did. Those that are still in the last minute. Yeah. Okie doke. Listening to the end of it. Yes, Deb?
Rick, I've been playing on your spreadsheet.
Yep.
Don't know that I've got everyone, but I've also got screenshots of participants as well. So
Yeah, well, there is a recording of the meeting anyway. So if you think we've missed some, did you take a note of the number we're in the first meeting?
35.
35, right? Yeah. So
35. Yeah.
So 34
That's what
came to this. Yeah. So
Yeah.
only one didn't
Yeah.
come through. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, doke.
No, there was one. AIDS number 6 said he wasn't actually in the first meeting, but I don't know who it is.
Oh, okay. AID number 6. Where's that come from?
AIDS. That was his
AI
name on
Oh,
his actual login name.
all right. AIDS.
Yeah, 6.
AIDS. AIDS 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll see if I can figure out who that was. It should show up on the list, or and I can. Yeah, it's probably AIDS is probably his business name acronym.
We'll be guessing, but he said he wasn't in the first meeting, but he said that when he was about to leave, and I tried to ask him what's his business name, but he disappeared.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, if we don't get them all, that's the way it is. But I mean, everybody that has a copy of the link will get an email with information anyway. So, and hopefully, if we can draft up some minutes, I can include those minutes in that email that goes out.
No chance of that with the first one because I was trying to record names,
Yep.
and it was basically what you had in the agenda anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So I'll send a copy of these screenshots through as well as a backup plan.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Thanks, Debbie.
Talk later.
Honorary Secretary, Debbie.
Thanks for that. Bye.
Cheers. Good night.